friends, and Joseph Bredehoft, 25 years old, whom we either lived or was born in Greenville, Illinois, but most recently we believe was staying with a brother in Milwaukee. Those are the additional identifications made today. As Jerry just mentioned a moment ago, we are waiting for the charging to take place in Judge Crivello's court. Once the charging has taken place, the next step is a preliminary hearing that has to happen within 10 days, but we also understand that the defendant in this case could waive the preliminary hearing.
Yeah, that has been known to happen from time to time. His attorney just walking by there, having taken the position publicly that that his client is remorseful and sad about what has happened, and has made the point of saying there comes a time when you simply have to tell the whole truth, and he apparently is proposing to do that, at least as he understands the whole truth. So as courthouse business goes, this is moving along fairly quickly. They scheduled the hearing for 4 o'clock. The primary movers in the case now beginning to arrive, as you can see. And again, as I said, there is no mandatory requirement, nor as far as I know, that the defendant has to be there for this.
Absolutely not. In fact, no one at this point, as best we are able to determine from talking with our reporters, no one is yet sure whether Dahmer will make a court appearance today. However, we will perhaps today get our first look at the details of this case as they will be presented in a criminal complaint. Yesterday, what was the information that was released was, as Jerry mentioned, in an affidavit form. That was so that they could continue. They had to have enough proof to be able to continue to hold Dahmer. So they released an affidavit that did have some details of the information, not truly a confession, but rather information that he had given police that enabled police to develop charges, and in order to develop charges you have to have criminal complaints. So that's sort of how this all, that's how the ball starts rolling. This is the affidavit information from yesterday we mentioned.
In it, Dahmer stated that he had met the people whom he apparently admits having killed, either in taverns or in shopping centers, and he said that he would induce them to return with him to his home. He did that by offering them money, and he would say to them that he wanted them to go there simply so that he could take pictures of them. You see these in quotes because these are direct quotations from the affidavit he gave. He said that he would drug the individuals, and usually he would strangle them. That's the way he would kill them. And then, having done that, according to the affidavit, he said he would dismember the body so that he could retain, and he would take steps which are just too gruesome to discuss in order to be able to retain the skulls. He said he took Polaroid photographs of a number of the people while they were alive, then took pictures after he had killed them, and then took pictures sometimes of the body parts after he had dismembered them. Again, all those quotations from an affidavit which was released by the police yesterday. Quotations apparently from the defendant himself. Now everyone apparently moving out of the courtroom into the judge's chambers for a sort of pre-hearing conference. One thing that can happen here, and it's just impossible to guess what might happen, is that very often in a case like this, Marty, they will, when you have 11 or, as you said, as many as 15 or 17 cases, they will only charge in 1 or 2. There's several reasons why that might happen. Either they might charge just in 1 or 2 because that's all the information they've developed, but also as a practical matter, in case something goes wrong in the trying of one of those cases, they have, in this case, almost an endless string of other cases they could bring to bear.
In this case, perhaps even more than many others, the evidence, and of course you know that the amount of evidence is overwhelming, but in this case particularly the evidence and all the documentation that goes with it will have to be extremely succinct in one way, but in another way it's going to have to be very detailed. Because I would imagine it's very complicated. So when this whole chain of events starts to unfold, you will see everyone taking great precautions to make sure that everything is done properly and to the letter.
No doubt that's essentially, I mean, well, I don't pretend to be prescient, but one presumes that's probably why they're counseling in judges' chambers right now, because this is the last chance for everyone to sit down and say, okay, this is the position we are taking at the moment. This is what we expect to have happen next. There's all kinds of possibilities which could develop in there. The defendant could have changed his position. His attorney may have changed his position. He could change attorneys. There's frequently in a situation like this, one attorney will start the case, and then for any of an infinite number of reasons, before you actually even have the first court hearing, the defendant will have decided to discharge the attorney. The attorney will have decided that he doesn't want to do that. Anything could be going on. I can't imagine that this is the case, but in these conferences it can also be that one side or the other may request a change of judges for whatever reason they may have.
Absolutely, and of course you recognize Frank Crivello's name. Judge Frank Crivello was the one yesterday who released the affidavit to the news media, saying that information was pertinent and needed to be put out. We want to recap for you what we have learned today. As we said just a minute ago, Police are now linking Dahmer to 17 homicides. That is a different number from the number that we had the first 48 hours of this case. So now there are 17, as many as 17 homicides. Today we learned of 2 more bodies or parts of bodies that had been identified. They were 20-year-old Matt Turner of Chicago. We do not know whether he was currently in residence in Chicago, whether he was visiting Milwaukee when something happened. We don't know the details of that yet. And 25-year-old Joseph Bradahoff, who was listed as living in Greenville, Illinois, but we have found out that he was probably living with a brother here in Milwaukee. Maybe he was born in Greenville, maybe he had lived there for a while. We learned that information from Milwaukee Police Deputy Inspector Vincent Partipillo. He also says, Partipillo says that Turner often assumed the name of Donald Mantrell, so many of his friends may have known him by that name.
There's a strong suspicion, at least in my mind, that something of consequence is going on in the judge's chambers right now. Just as they came back out to us, we saw the bailiff going into judge's chambers, very quietly slipping in with what appeared to be not a legal pad, but rather a large stack of papers. So apparently there is some discussion of some document, clearly of some size, going on in the judge's chambers right now. When they come out of there, it's altogether conceivable that this has been an exercise in legalistic maneuvering,
yes,
and there will be no hearing. That could conceivably happen, although one wonders why it might, given the situation. We have a man who has essentially said, yes, I did it, I want to admit that, an attorney who has supported that position, and the process is necessary to at least charge him with something before they can do anything more. They can't...
There have been some other developments today as well that have been quite interesting. You might like to know that the neighborhood in which Jeffrey Dahmer lived, the Oxford Apartments at 25th and, help me out here, Jerry, I'm going to forget.
924 North 25th.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That the street now has been cordoned off because, as you are well aware, the last couple of days there's been a great deal of traffic. People coming from all over, now we understand, all over Wisconsin, as well as from all over the world. There's been a huge parade of news media, folks coming back and forth through that neighborhood. We understand now that they have cordoned that neighborhood off, and police are giving tickets to people who do not live there, do not belong there, or who are just wandering through. So be advised that if you were thinking about going down to the site of the apartment building, that has changed this afternoon, and they have taken some precautions to try and slow the traffic in that area.
I always hate being put in the position of doing this because it sounds like we're keeping secrets or something. It's not that, but I would like to say that a couple of Channel 12 News viewers during the course of this day have passed along to us directly some very important information. We're checking it out, and so I'd prefer not to go into the details of it just now. But we will, I hope, by 6 o'clock be able to tell you those things. This community has apparently grown weary of this kind of thing to the point that over and over and over, Crime Line Anonymous and Alan May have had great success, exclusively because people in the community have taken the time and trouble to call and say, I know this, I think this looks to me like it might be. Police clearly have a connection between, as the chief of police said, who done it, and now I believe in great measure how it was done. What they need to do now, the chief of police in the courtroom there just now.
Absolutely, and Vincent Partipillo.
What they need to know now is who are the victims, who else might be, might this string of terror go outside the information they currently have. That's the kind of information that can most quickly come from the community. So, as you know, they have set up a special phone line at the police department, or you can call Crime Line Anonymous.
I was going to say, if we could get Mike to tell one of us in our earpieces here, remind us as to what that phone number is. We've memorized quite a few, but I've not remembered that one. So if you can tell us what that phone number is, Mike.
935-7379, is that right? Okay, 935-7379. You can call that number. It's full-time number at the police department. Or,
in fact, I think they call it the Dahmer hotline.
Probably.
So.
Or Crime Line Anonymous, 1-800-73-CRIME. You know, you could just make this whole process a lot simpler. And with Crime Line Anonymous, you never have to get involved. So if you have information which you could share, that would be deeply appreciated. In case you just joined us at 10 minutes after the hour, we're looking at a live camera in Judge Frank Crivello's court, courtroom number 404, downtown the Milwaukee Circuit Court area. They are about to begin, we believe, a charging hearing for Jeffrey Dahmer on one or more of the perhaps now 17 murders with which he is believed to have been directly connected. Counsel for defense, prosecutor, the judge, and a court bailiff went into the judge's chambers about 6 minutes ago now for a pre-hearing conference. That is not uncommon for them to do that, but a moment or so after they went in, Another bailiff entered the judge's chambers carrying a large stack of documents. One would think that the defense and prosecutors would have with them the normal documents which they were going to use, and so there was some suspicion, at least, that perhaps they called for additional information from somewhere.
Just let me interrupt here for 1 second and let folks out there know, Jerry, that that is a 1982 picture you're looking at of Dahmer, who is now 31 years old. That picture, if I remember correctly, was akin to a mugshot that was taken perhaps after the or during the course of the sexual assault charge of which Dahmer was convicted. So we have yet to get our first look at Jeffrey Dahmer in 1991, and as you mentioned a moment ago, he may or may not be present in court today. It is at the discretion of Dahmer and his attorneys, and we have not heard one way or the other. Of course, there's great speculation that he will not be in courtroom. And we might mention, too, that what you're looking at there is Judge Crivello's courtroom, one of the larger courtrooms, and it's well laid out, but we have to tell you for the past 2 days, yesterday, when the affidavit was released, and then, of course, again today, it's been packed, absolutely packed. And they are allowing cameras and reporters to sit in places a lot closer to the bench than usual. As a matter of fact, yesterday there were so many people in the courtroom that they actually had a ring almost around the entire area. So there's just an awful lot of people down there who want to know what's going on.
Clearly the session in the judge's chamber has broken up. There's the district attorney, E. Michael McCann, who has just walked out and assumed his position at the right side of the courtroom. His assistant's now coming around behind there. One presumes that just to the left of the scene that we can see. The defense has also left the judge's chambers. I wish we could tell you that. Perhaps you'll know in just a matter of moments. But since the prosecutors are taking their seats at the table, clearly the court is about to begin this hearing, which will simply be a matter of formally saying to Jeffrey Dahmer, you are charged with, and then whatever the charges they may choose to bring today. For
the past couple of days, of course, you're well aware by now as well that Dahmer has cooperated with police in many areas. I mean, he's helped them to identify what he called his victims. He has given them great details, as we understand it, in lots of different forms. And a lot of that information was released yesterday in the affidavit. But as I mentioned, the actual details of it will come in the criminal complaint, and it's the criminal complaint that will be actually used to charge Jeffrey Dahmer.
One of the things that almost invariably happens in a situation like this is all across the country people start looking through, in this case, missing person files and saying, who do we have missing who might have had reason to be in Milwaukee, who may have turned out to be one of the victims? And there are a large number of people whose names we don't know. One presumes there are at least a fairly substantial number of people whose names none of the investigators know yet. So there are investigations, serious ongoing investigations in Ohio and Illinois, as well as in Wisconsin. The list that Marty gave us earlier of the victims were all Illinois related, the people that we know thus far, although some did have ties back to Milwaukee.
Let me suggest here that the reason the camera is focusing on this door is this is the door just to the right of Crivello's courtroom that opens onto and works its way back through a series of corridors like a maze that is part of the intake